My first time preaching at a place, I usually start out being really nervous all day, but I just kept thinking about how I was going to get to wear a Britney Spears mic. It kind of cheered me up a little bit. I wasn't so scared and so nervous, and I hope that that's probably the last time that I'm going to mention Britney Spears from up here. I do want to make one plug. On Tuesday night at 6:30, Trunk or Treat. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I encourage you, please come up here, decorate your trunk. We're going to have prizes. It's going to be a lot of fun, and so really encourage you to participate in that. And if you're going to dress up as Britney Spears, we've got a mic for you. So, okay, now, surely that'll be the last time. We're going to start out in the book of Exodus. The book of Exodus. I'm just going to kind of bring y'all through a little bit. In Exodus chapter 3, we learn about a guy, and his name is Jethro. And Jethro is the father-in-law of Moses. And we all know who Moses is. He's a really popular guy. Everybody's heard of it. Even people that don't go to church know who Moses is. And so we see this Jethro guy, and Moses is taking care of Jethro's sheep. And we're not talking about the Beverly Hillbillies, no, even though he's probably funnier than this Jethro. But Jethro was his father-in-law. He's taking care of his sheep. And then in chapter 4, we see where Moses gets the calling from the burning bush. And then chapters 5 through 12, after Moses accepted this calling that God has given him, we see in chapters 5 through 12 where the plagues all happen. And we see that what God has done through Moses. And it's a pretty awesome section of the Bible to read, the things that God does through Moses. And then in chapter 13 and 14, we have the story of the Israelites escaping the Egyptians by probably the most awesome miracle, in my opinion, that ever was. The crossing of the Red Sea. God parts the Red Sea when he knows that the Israelites are in trouble, and they all pass over on dry land, and it's awesome. And then in chapters 16 and 17, we see that God takes care of the Israelites when they were struggling, trying to make it to the Promised Land. They were going through a lot of stuff, and God provided for them. God took care of them. And then we'll skip down to chapter 18. In chapter 18, something awesome happens. Chapter 18, I just want you to imagine, have you ever had a story that you just couldn't wait to tell? Okay, maybe it's that you're going to have a child or a grandchild. You can't wait to tell everybody, and you're just waiting for that moment. And then when you finally get to, you don't just go and tell your friends. You call up your family, your mom, your dad. You call everybody that you know, and you're like, guess what? You will never believe this. That's what's happening in chapter 18. Because Moses has experienced all of this stuff. He gets called by a burning bush that's burning, and it never actually burns. It's still fine, healthy, whatever. And then he goes and he accepts that call, and he watches all the plagues happen. And then he's so scared there for a little bit when they're going up to the Red Sea, and then God provides that way out through the Red Sea. So all this stuff happens to Moses. And finally, in chapter 18, he sees his father-in-law, Jethro. And it's a pretty cool little situation here. In chapter 18, verses 8 through 9, it says, again, just imagine you have that story that you can't wait to tell. That's where Moses is. And that's Exodus 18. We're going to read verses 8 and 9. It says, Then Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had come upon them in the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced for all the good that the Lord had done to Israel, in that he had delivered them out of the hand of the Egyptians. Now, Jethro is just really just a random stranger. He doesn't really have any kind of connection with God. He doesn't have any kind of following of God, or at least we don't know that. And so Jethro is seeing all this crazy stuff that Moses has done, and he's like, man, that is awesome. And so when we see the way that he reacts to this story, it's exactly what we want. You know, when we have that story and we can't wait to tell somebody, and then we do, and then everybody's rejoicing, they're excited, they're happy, and that's the way Jethro responds. And Moses, I'm sure, is excited. He's like, man, this is so great. And of course, that's the reaction that you want. Now, if you will, skip down to verse 17. We're still there in Exodus chapter 18. We're going to be in verse 17. So there was rejoicing. There was a great rejoicing there. But then things kind of start turning a little bit. It says, Jethro said to him, "What you are doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You are not able to do it alone. Now obey my voice. I will give you advice, and God be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God. And you shall warn them about the statutes and the laws and make them know the way in which they must walk and what they must do. Moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate bribes, and place those men over people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens, and let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter they can bring to you, but any small matter, let them decide themselves. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this, God will direct you. You will be able to endure, and all this people also will go to their place in peace." So you see right there before our eyes, as we're reading through this, or as you're listening to this, we see a relationship building more. Yeah, he got to go and he got to tell Jethro this great story, this awesome time, and all these things that happened to him that were so cool. And then he says, "That's awesome and that's great, but Moses, you can't make every single little decision. You're going to wear yourself out. So what you need to do is and he gives him this advice. And he tells Moses, you need to follow through with this advice. And I'll tell you, this is his father-in-law talking to him. And so, this could be a hard thing for Moses to do. Take advice from a father-in-law, but not because of his relation to him, but because he knows that Jethro cares is why he listens to him. And in verse 25, we see what Moses does. Moses chose able men out of all of Israel, and he made them heads over the people, chiefs of thousands, chiefs of hundreds, fifties, and of tens. And they judged the people at all times. And any hard case they had, they brought it to Moses. But any smaller case, they decided themselves. Then Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went away into his own country. What you see in those verses is that Moses took the advice of his father-in-law. He did just what Jethro instructed him to do. He listened, and he obeyed the man that he had built a relationship with. Jethro's words are held high by Moses because Moses' relationship with Jethro is a big deal. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. This is what we call a mentor relationship, a mentor-type relationship. We see the relationships that they have with each other. We see how they respond to each other. And throughout the Bible, we have tons, and I mean tons, of mentorships. And I'm going to kind of name a few. If we can get the things here. So we have Eli. He mentored Samuel. Samuel mentored Saul and David. Elijah mentored Elisha. And then we have Elisha, who mentored King Joash. Naomi mentored Ruth. Daniel mentored Nebuchadnezzar, which is, to me, it's kind of funny that Daniel was the one mentoring Nebuchadnezzar because Daniel was just some guy and Nebuchadnezzar was the king. And then we have Mordecai when he mentored Esther, the whole "for such a time as this." And then we have Priscilla and Aquila when they mentored Apollos because, Apollos could teach well, but he had a hard time understanding. And Priscilla really helped him out. And then we have probably the greatest mentor that has ever lived, Jesus Christ, who mentored his disciples. And in a way, he mentors us. There were times where he had to correct his disciples. There were times when he had to encourage his disciples. And there were times where his disciples were nothing but just huge disappointments. And Jesus mentored them. He gave them advice, and he helped them. This lesson is stressing the importance of mentorships. The older mentoring the younger. And it's an important lesson. In my opinion, it is the most important lesson for our youth group and for our teenagers. Mentors are needed. In Titus 2 that was read before, I really appreciate you reading that before. We'll go through it again, but Titus 2 verses 1 through 8. Go ahead and turn there. Titus 2, 1 through 8, and I'll give you time to get there. This is a great example of a mentor type. This is Titus coming out. He's just saying this is exactly how you mentor people. This is exactly how you mentor people. Titus chapter 2, verses 1 through 8. It says, "But as for you, teach what accords with sound doctrine. Older men to be sober-minded, dignified, self-controlled, sound in faith, in love, and in steadfastness. Older women likewise are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slaves to much wine. They are to teach what is good, and so train the young women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled, pure, working at home, kind and submissive to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be reviled. Likewise, urge the younger men to be self-controlled. Show yourself in all respects to be a model of good works. And in your teaching, show integrity, dignity, and sound speech that cannot be condemned, so that an opponent may be put to shame, having nothing evil to say about us." In this little section here, you see 4 distinct groups that are talked about. You have your older men, you have younger men, you have older women, and you have younger women. Now, if you notice the relationship here, this is the same thing as what Moses had with Jethro. It's that relationship. And focus on what's being said. The relationship is that the older mentor the younger. You notice the break right here where it says, "Likewise urge the young men to be sensible." There's a break there in the scripture. "In all things, show yourself to be a good example." We can't teach young people without a relationship with them. And we can't teach younger people without investing our time into those people. And that's what this is talking about. The older are to mentor the younger. Now I'm going to throw some numbers at you. The National Association of Evangelicals, it's a big group that's made up of over 60 denominations, dozens of different ministries, dozens of different things. Among themselves, they passed a resolution that deplored the epidemic of young people leaving the evangelical church. Now, evangelical church includes, you have Catholic churches, you have Baptist churches. I'm talking every church, all of Christendom is where they did this research. Between the ages of 17 to 19, there's a huge drop that takes place. And this study was done with teenagers who attended regularly while at church. And so we're talking about by the time they were growing, they were small all the way until they graduated. These are people that attended church services at least 3 Sundays every month. At least 3 Sundays every month. And these are the kids that they talked to. The research says that 80% of those people, after they graduate, they walk out the doors and they never come back. Now, I don't know about y'all, but when I heard that number and I read that number, I thought, 80%? When they turn 18, they graduate, they go off to college, or they go into the workforce, whatever it is, 80% don't come back to church. Now I'm going to go even further, because that 80% that leave and they never come back, now 80% of that 80% never meant to do it in the first place. That 80%, they said, we never really meant to do that. In fact, I kind of want to go back to church, and I know that that's what I need to be doing, and I never really meant to do that. I never really meant to fall out of going to church. It just kind of happened to me. And that's what they saw every time they talked to these people, those kids. They said, it just kind of happened. We just quit going. There's really no reason. Nobody said anything to us. Nobody did anything. We just quit going. But that also leaves us with 20%. And that's the part that really scares me, because that 20%, they never plan to go back to church. That 20%, before they turned 18, they had already decided, you know what, as soon as I graduate, I'm out of here. I don't ever want to go back to church again. The only reason I'm going is because my parents are making me go. Or the only reason I'm going is because I feel like I have to go. But as soon as I get some freedom and as soon as I get away from all this, then I'm not ever going to go back to church. And that's 20%. To me, that's scary. It's always great to see when someone has fallen away from Christ and they come back. It's just like when in Luke chapter 15, when we see the lost boy. The boy goes off and he has reckless and wild living, and he comes back and they throw a huge party for him. We love to see that, but there's only about 20% that ever do that. And that's after they're usually in their 30s. And so what we're looking at is 70% estimated that literally as soon as they graduate, they walk out those doors back there, or as soon as they go into the workforce or whatever it is that they decide to do and they get some freedom, that they walk out those doors, whether they plan on never coming back to church or not, they aren't coming back to church. They aren't living Christian lives. They are no longer being Christian people. And I am not okay with that. I can't tell you how many times I've been in the youth ministry game, I guess you could say, for almost a decade now. And I can't tell you how many times I see this number and I see it happen over and over and over. And we're going to a conference next week. Me and Spencer are going to a conference next week, and I can almost guarantee you I will talk to at least 10 people there, and they will say the same thing that I'm telling you now. We are losing about 70% of our teenagers. And to me, that's not okay. I am not okay with losing 70% of our teenagers. And I hope and I pray that you aren't either. Our elders, I can guarantee you, are not okay with losing 70% of our teenagers. And I will give my life to prevent that number. Even if it lowers it 1%, I will give my entire life to fighting against that. And we've got to quit shaking our heads in disappointment at our teenagers. We've got to stop blaming them for their lack of interest or their lack of attendance in church and in church-related activities. We need to have instead an attitude that stands up and is willing and ready to do something about it. Having an attitude that makes change happen. And I have a lot more numbers that I can throw at you, and I can tell you a lot more stuff that'll scare you to death about our teenagers. But instead, what I want to do is I want to have our teenagers 7th grade through 12th grade come up here and stand in front of the church here. Just stand up here in front of the church, 7th through 12th grade. Just kind of make a line, I guess. Start right here and just kind of make a line. And it's okay if you double up, no problems. We're not in any kind of hurry, so y'all can just kind of take your time. So here we are. We have our 7th through 12th graders. I don't know how many of them there are. I'm not going to take the time to count. But this is our youth group. They're here this Sunday night. This is our regular attending youth group. And I know that they feel a little awkward here, and I'm really glad that y'all participated, and I'm really glad that y'all are here. But what I want to happen now, I'm going to say everybody from Keeley this way. Y'all just walk out those doors back there. Come up here in the center. If we don't change the way that we're doing things, this is what the future of the church looks like. We had all those kids up here, and it was pretty awesome. Sorry, I'm starting to get a little choked up. We have all of these kids that were up here, and I just saw, there's like 40 or 50 of them here on a Sunday night. And if we look at the 80% of those kids who just walked out those doors, this is what we're left with. This is the future of the church. This is what we're looking at if things don't change in Christianity. This is all we've got. Just this 20% here. And I don't know about y'all, but when we put those statistics up there, it's hard to hear the statistics, but when you start putting faces to numbers, things get a little more serious. Things get a little more scary. Because when you put faces to numbers, you're putting souls on the line. We have a bunch of great kids here, but if we don't change up the way that we're doing things, we're only going to be left with 20% of them. Unless we make a change. We can't just bow our heads. We can't just shake our heads in disappointment about how many of our teenagers are leaving the churches and how these pews are all being empty, and we can't talk about that kind of stuff. We have to do something about it because this is real. It is real. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but in order for this to be prevented, mentorships have to happen, and they need to happen now. Now I'm going to ask you a question. When they walked out those doors, why didn't I see any of you parents or any of the church members say, hey, we don't want you to leave? Why weren't you standing up and preventing them from leaving? Was it because I didn't ask you, hey, is there any chance you could keep this person from walking out those doors? Because I shouldn't have to ask you for help. I shouldn't have to ask you to help a struggling teenager, and we know that at least 80% of these teenagers that were here are struggling teenagers. I shouldn't have to ask you to help those people. We need mentors. We need people who are willing to stand up, stand in front of those doors, and don't let them leave. Make them want to be members of this church. Make them want to be dedicated Christian people, Christ followers. And I love our teenagers with all of my heart. And I know I've only been here for 6 weeks, but I can't tell you the amount of love that I have for these kids. And I'm tired of seeing kids that I love so much graduate or go out into the workforce or whatever it is that they do and never come back in these doors again. And I'm asking you all for help. Teenagers that walked out, y'all can go ahead and head back in here. Hopefully y'all didn't stay out there. I'm glad seeing everybody coming back in. Okay, we're good. We're good. Moving forward, y'all can go ahead and sit down too. Thank y'all so much for your participation. Moving forward, we're going to make our way to fix this problem. We're going to have a goal. We as a church are going to commit to our youth ministry. We're going to be involved. You don't have to be a parent to be involved. You don't have to be a youth deacon to be involved. You don't have to be a preacher to be involved. You don't have to be old to be involved. You don't have to be young to be involved. We are all important parts of this body of believers. We all have great things to offer our students. And we as a church can really do some great things. And if you don't believe me, go back and read through the book of Acts and see what Christian people can do. Statistically, there's 4 factors that change up these statistics a whole lot. The National Association of Evangelicals did an extensive research on 27,000 students spread across the United States in 60 different denominations that included the Churches of Christ. And these 4 factors are things that made a huge difference in determining whether teenagers stayed in church and were active in church after they graduated. Number 1, I wanted the church to help guide my decisions in everyday life. So what does that look like? What does it look like when you say, I want the church to help guide my decisions in everyday life? I'll tell you what it looks like. It looks like giving these teenagers a great basis for the Christian walk. And that all starts at home. It continues in our Bible classes. The pews that you're sitting in, this is a great place to be. We have to help our teenagers by guiding their decisions in their everyday lives. My parents were still married to each other. This is the second one. My parents are still married to each other. They both attend church regularly. Again, I know that this may be impossible, and I know that this might be impractical for some families, but I promise you that having one parent that's committed to being a parent and they're wanting to help their child be a piece of this body of Christ, it's a lot better than having 0 parents who are committed. And I can give you statistics on that subject as well. Number 3, and I have to commend Spencer with this. Every sermon that I've ever heard him preach, I feel like my spiritual life and my spiritual growth and my biblical knowledge has just exploded. But number 3 is the preacher's sermons were relevant to my life. And I want to talk about this bit because it's vital that our teens hear a sermon that's relevant to our lives. A preacher can be here and he can preach great sermons like Spencer does every Sunday. He can do some awesome and do some relevant things. But if these teenagers aren't here, what much good does that do for them? I've worked in youth ministry, like I said, for nearly a decade now, and no matter what church I'm working with, I see a need for Bible class teachers. If you're scared you might not be a good teacher, you're wrong. If you've ever been a Bible class teacher, or if you've ever preached a sermon or given a devo or done any kind of speaking, you're great. You're appreciated. We love people that are willing to do those things. And I'll tell you, there's been several times where I've gotten up in front of a lot of people like I am tonight, and I have really felt like I've done a terrible job presenting what I'm wanting to do. And I'm sure any of you that have done preaching or a devotional or something like that have all experienced something like that, where you just leave the place and you're like, man, I really dropped the ball there. But I'll tell you, every time that I have ever done that, and I felt so bad, like I had let this whole group of people down with a lesson that I've prepared, and maybe I wasn't exactly prepared as much as I thought I was, or whatever the reason was, every single time, people come up to me, they shake my hand, they give me a hug, and they said, I really appreciate the words that you shared with us tonight. Or I really appreciate that Bible class that you taught today. I really appreciate the love that you show and the things that you do every day. And here I am thinking that was a horrible lesson. And here's some people that are giving me encouraging messages. And number 4, this is probably the most important one to me, and that it is that faithful, committed teenagers said that they had at least one adult that made a significant investment in them spiritually and personally. I tell our teens to invest in each other. I tell them to invest in our church, to really just buy in and really adopt these beliefs and these things and listen to the teachings and buy into it. And I tell them that because that is how relationships grow. And we need to invest in the spirituality of our kids. We need to invest time and effort into our kids. And if you're not having spiritual conversations with your children, your teenagers, if you're not having spiritual conversations with them, you're doing them a disservice. Ask them about their Bible classes on the way home or when you get home. Ask them about the struggles, the disappointments, the things that they have. Find conversations so that you can talk back to spiritual things. Because that's what Jesus did. He used his surroundings and his environment to bring up subjects that can be teachable moments. Maybe you don't have kids in the house anymore. Guess what? Our students need you too. In fact, they may need you even more. Our students need you to invest your time, your energy into them. And it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how young you are. All that matters is that you are a committed Christian. The church needs you, and you're a vital member of this congregation. When we as adults are willing to invest our time into our kids, it's going to have lasting consequences, and it's going to show lasting effects. When teenagers see an active practice faith in their parents and an active practice faith in church members, they stop being dropouts and they start being disciples. And we should all be doing things to serve God, because you never know how much these students that are standing right here in front of you tonight are watching you and are taking notes, and they're studying the way that you behave and the things that you do. And these 3 suggestions are things that I want to make to the church here at Valley View. Just these 3 suggestions before I close out. Number 1, please disciple our students. Disciple our youth group. If our teens see biblical teaching as relevant and important from examples of adults and peers and church as essential to their life decisions, they don't drop out. Parents, it's a lot of responsibility on you. I know. But they're watching you more than anyone else in their lives. So many people put so much time and effort into their sermons, their devotionals, their Bible classes, and so many of our teachers put in hours of preparing a Bible class, only for some of their teens to go home and say that it's boring. And I'll tell you, the Word of God is not boring. It's the most amazing book that's ever been written. And what we allow our kids to do sometimes, and I see it happening everywhere that I've been, is that we allow our kids to go to this fun thing and go to that fun thing, and they come to all the fun things. Like when we go to Pumpkin Hollow, they're all there. But when there's a devotional or a Bible study to be had, where'd they all go? We have to be able to have opportunities to get together and study God's Word. And if our teenagers aren't there, it's not doing any good. Number 2, have a home with committed Christian parents. I know that may be impractical or impossible for some people that aren't in a marriage, but it does make a difference when one parent is committed to God and they show that they're committed to God to their children. Our students need to see commitment. They need to know that on Sunday we go to Bible class, and on Wednesday we go to Bible class. There's no discussions. You don't have to ask her if we're going or not. There should not be a question. I've had a single parent come to me and talk to me about this very subject one time. She said she needed to talk to me, and all I did was listen. Didn't even have to say a word. She told me the story of her family being less and less committed, that her daughter, who was 10 years old, and one Wednesday she came home from school and she said, "Mom, I know tonight's Wednesday. Are we going to church tonight? Because I really miss going." And the parent had not even realized that they had been missing that much. She didn't even realize that her children were being raised in a household where it was a normal thing for them to just skip church services. And so on that day, she recommitted to bring her teenagers and her kids to services. She recommitted to being a Christ-following parent. And number 3, we have to recognize that it takes a church to raise a committed young Christian. And I believe that this is the most important suggestion that can be made. We must involve adults in our discipleship process. This is where preachers, this is where youth ministers, involvement ministers, resident ministers, elders, volunteers, anybody who's willing to invest their lives into our teenagers, this is where you come in. And we have a ton of opportunities for you. And when I say a ton, I mean we have a ton. On Tuesday, guess what? Trunk or treat. We have that coming up on Tuesday. Go ahead and go to that next slide that has a few of these things. We have Trunk or Treat coming up Tuesday. We have our Vacation Bible School that I'm sure I've heard great things about our Vacation Bible Schools. That's going to be great too. We have all kinds of stuff. We're going to start doing retreats every year. We're going to start trying to get more things where we can get our teenagers close to each other and bring them in different places and make that discipleship process happen. We have countless devotionals planned for the next year. You can open up your home and you can host a devotional for our kids. And I want to say this one more time. Anyone can do this. You don't have to be young. You don't have to be cool. Anybody can participate in this. It doesn't matter if you're married, divorced, single, 20, or 100. We want to be in your home and we want to spend time with you. We would love to come to your house and spend time with you. We can always use help with Lads to Leaders. It'd be great to have more that participated in it. It would be great to have more that are volunteering to help out and train our teenagers into being leaders. We have to be willing to teach Bible classes. And I'm sure we'll need Bible class teachers for our next quarter. Be someone who steps up. Whether you've taught Bible class before or not, we need you. We want you to teach Bible class. We don't want to just be ambassadors from the Valley View Church of Christ, but we want to serve our community in the name of Christ. And so something that, I know this might be a little ambitious, but where I came from, we had a thing that we called West Tennessee Work Camp. And that was where we went around and we painted and we fixed up and we mowed people's houses that maybe they just weren't very fortunate in life. They had a lot of things going on, whether they were older or they were just impoverished, whatever it was. We went to their houses, we mowed their yards, we did a lot of landscaping, minor repairs, and we painted their houses. And I can't tell you how many times those people who we've fixed their houses up have come to this big banquet that we have on the Thursday night, and they say, "I feel like I live in a real house." For the first time in my life, I've been living for 50-something years, and this is the first time I feel like I'm living in a real house and not just some dump. It happens every year. I'd like to bring that here, to putting that into our communities here in Jonesboro and going to those places that are impoverished and their houses are not looking so great, and going there and helping those people out, because that is how you make a difference in a community. And the work camp that we're hoping to accomplish is a work that brings unity among our area churches and our area youth groups and all of the churches of Christ. We want to be the church on the hill that people can't help but notice. And I've been pleased with the participation that we've received in events since I've been here. I've been so pleased with all the people that have been willing to open up their houses in the last month. I'm only seeing it getting better and bigger. And if we commit to our youth group and we commit to our youth program, those dropouts that I was talking about earlier, they don't exist anymore. If we mentor our teenagers and we try to build up those relationships, those dropouts don't exist anymore. But we have to be willing to get 100% behind this youth program, and we have to be willing to commit some time to helping disciple our teenagers. And I'm begging you and I'm imploring you, please be involved in our youth ministry. Please bring your children to our services. Bring them to our Bible class. We have teachers that are investing so much of their time into this service. Our kids need you. And we're going to be doing a ton of things that will allow you to be involved and you can be able to work with our students. And parents, I just want you to know that I pray for your kids every single day. I pray for them by name. I pray for better relationships. I pray for better friendships. Whatever they're experiencing or whatever they're struggling with, whatever they're dealing with in their lives, I'm praying for them every single day. I'm passionate about these things. That's why I've given my life to serving our teenagers and our kids. My purpose on earth is to give your kids my life, my time, my money, my energy, everything that I have. And there's a reason why I'm willing to give your children so much of my time. There's a reason why I'm willing to drive the hours and hours that I'm willing to drive and the time that I'm willing to give. There's a reason I voluntarily get on a bus with 20 teenagers packed in together. There's a reason that I do the things that I do. And it's because I care about the youth here at Valley View. I care about the souls of our kids. And I love our youth group. And I'm willing to do anything and everything I can to help your teenagers and to help your students not be one of those statistics. In church, do you want some easy ways that you can help out this problem? After services tonight, stop one of our kids and just say, "How are you doing? How was your week this past week? What do you got coming up next week?" Ask them how school's going. Ask them about if they're excited about school next week. Ask them about what kind of things that they enjoy doing. Because when they walk out those doors, it could be the very last time that we see them here. And to our teenagers, I promise to you that as long as I am alive, I will do everything in my power to prevent you from being a part of that 80%. I promise to love you and serve you, and I promise to do everything that I can, everything in my power for you, because I love you. And if youth group members, if you want to keep from being a part of that 80%, tell somebody. Tell me, tell Spencer, tell a friend, tell your parents, tell a member that you love here, that you know here, an elder. Speak to somebody and say, I don't want to be a part of that 80%. I don't want to be somebody who wasn't planning on going to church and just kind of fell out of it. I want to be a committed Christ follower when I graduate. You have an opportunity tonight to come up here and you can cry with me as we try to fix whatever it is that's bringing you down. And adults, I don't want to leave you out either. You also have an opportunity to come up here and be open and to be honest with this wonderful church and say that you can't do things all on your own, because that's what I'm saying to you tonight. I can't do these things all on my own. There's no better time to come up here and confess those things as we stand and as we sing this song. Above all powers, above all